being a biologist here is like you have to learn your animals. So this isn't necessarily my tank, but I can still see the changes because I'm up here quite often. But you have to watch your animals to learn those behaviors so that you know if something's wrong. Like if they stop eating or things like that. A lot of what I've learned here with these fish, I learned on the job. I did go to A&M Galveston for 4 years. I studied fish and marine mammals, but I focused on marine mammals based off of learning from my boss and other biologists here. I've learned a lot more about fish. You go to school, you learn the basics. They have to teach you a lot, you know, but once you're in the job, you learn a lot more hands-on and specifically oriented to what you're working with. And corals are animals, they're not plants as some people think they are. They do feed off of the sun, a lot of species do, but they also feed off of zooplankton and phytoplankton as well as fish waste. That's kind of how corals grow. You just have to have a small piece of the coral and it'll start growing from there. So there's 2 different types of corals. There's soft corals and hard corals. So the soft corals are the ones that are going to move freely with the water current. So you can see the sponge corals right here, the zoas back there. They're all going to move with the water current. Your hard corals are going to be really stiff and they're not going to move around a lot. So that's going to be like that bird's nest that's right there. And when hard corals die, you're left with a skeleton. So you can actually study that piece of skeleton, kind of see its structure. Soft corals, when they die, they just deteriorate. There's no calcium buildup left behind. Coral tanks are very expensive to keep up. One piece of coral that might be that big can cost you a couple $100. So it can be very expensive to keep. And then of course the salt just to mix into the water can be expensive as well. That's a zebra shark. So he's the other species that's from Australia. The reason why they're called a zebra shark is because when they're a baby, they have stripes. So he's almost fully grown. He is a male. You can see the 2 claspers on the bottom, so there's 2 extra fins. All sharks and rays, if they're a male, will have those 2 extra fins. The black tip reef shark you can find here in the Gulf of Mexico, usually hanging around our reefs, so like out at the flower gardens. This is a queen snake grouper. She is from Australia. She's approximately about 180 pounds, but she will top off at about 900. So once she's fully grown, she'll be about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. These 2 guys are from here. Those are called black drum. When they swim by again, you'll notice on the bottom of their face they have whiskers or barbels, as fish have. What they'll do is they'll kind of rub them against the bottom of the, so you can see them down there. They'll rub them against the gravel and stuff, like in the wild, to find crab and shrimp and other things that might be flounder that might be hiding in the bottom. Some species of fish can switch their gender. Like most likely she's a female because she's the only one in here. She's the dominant one, so most likely she's female. If we had a couple of them, whichever one is dominant, so it'll be the one that gets to feed first, the one that you'll see the dominant traits come into them will be female, and the rest of them in the tank will most likely be male. On her belly, right before that bottom fin, there's a piece of skin that kind of sticks out, and that's where it's basically like an anal pore, but the females, when they're like in mating and stuff, it'll stick out when they're ready to mate, and hers is sticking out right now, which is how I'm for sure she's a female at this point in the season. That's a black grouper. So what's cool about him is depending on his mood, he can change colors. So he can be anywhere from ghost white with like black tips on his fins to pitch black. So right now he's kind of gray. That's because he's very content. He doesn't feel threatened or anything like that. When he gets really excited or when we're feeding him, he'll turn white. And then when he's really angry or feels threatened by another fish or that something's bad is happening to him, he turns black. So he's turning lighter just as we're watching him. and that's because the divers are about to get in. He loves playing with the divers and their bubbles and stuff, so it's kind of like a little puppy in the tank. So alligator gars can live in freshwater or saltwater. In the wild, what they'll do is they'll move from fresh to salt depending on their breeding. So they'll move to saltwater to mate and stuff, and then they move back to the freshwater to lay their eggs. Spots. That's a red drum, or also known as a redfish. It's a big game fish here in Texas. A lot of these fish are big game fish in Texas. This is a tarpon. So these guys, if you ever were to go deep sea fishing, those are a pretty common thing that people will go out fishing for. Like if a bird is sitting on the surface of the water, they'll jump out of the water to kind of push it under, and then they'll catch the bird and can eat the bird and stuff like that. Yeah, they can eat birds, like seabirds and things that will kind of rest on the surface of the water. They'll eat other fish and things as well. Two blackfish right here. These are called triggerfish. Do you see that spine that sticks up on top of their body? Oh yeah. They have one on the bottom of their body too. And the reason for this is that they'll nuzzle themselves into the corals, and they'll put those triggers up or those spines up, and it'll lock them in. That way they can sleep. Fish do sleep. Most of the time they just kind of sit somewhere really still. But these guys, they've developed those spines so that they don't have to worry about a predator coming up and trying to yank them out. So it's a pretty cool adaptation. So these are stingrays, which fall underneath the family of fish. So they are still a fish. They're just specifically a stingray. But they are a pretty friendly type of animal. They're not looking to hurt anybody. We do cut their barbs back just out of safety, so that it's blunt. That way it's not sharp and it can't penetrate your skin. However, the only reason why they're going to try to sting somebody is if they got stepped on, or if somebody hits them really hard, if they feel threatened. So the barb isn't at the end of the tail, it's actually at the base of the body. So not all stingrays live in saltwater. There are freshwater species. Most freshwater species are round like a plate, whereas saltwater species tend to be a little bit more stretched out. The fish we feed the stingrays downstairs, they're called silver sides. They're little like green and silver fish, and you can only so many of those can be caught in a year. Because of that, we actually, usually by the end of the summer, we've hit our catch limit for the year. Like the entire United States has hit their catch limit for the year, which means we can't get it anymore for our stingrays, and we have to think of something else to go in those feeding trays for people to feed them. So sometimes we'll switch over to shrimp, or we'll switch to smelt or something different. But all of our fish, we make sure that they're all caught under the catch limits. This big guy, he's a peacock bass. He has this black spot right here. It's called an eye spot. So you might have seen it on other types of fish. You may have seen it on like butterflies, things like that. So what it's to do is to make his predators think that that's his face, so that they'll attack his tail. The tail is the strongest part of a fish. So they have that peduncle muscle, which is right in the tail. That's their strongest muscle, so he'll be able to hit his predator really hard. And plus, if it's his tail that's hurt and not his face, he's going to have a better chance of surviving. So that's one of the reasons why he has the eye spot. This guy right here, this is a pacu. They're related to the red belly piranha and the black piranha, but they look a lot like the red belly. These guys are omnivores, which means they'll eat meats or vegetables. So we could put a whole head of lettuce in here and they would devour it in like 10 minutes. But these guys, they can grow to be about 400 pounds. These are called fairy cichlids or Bachardi cichlids. So each generation before watches the next generation that's born. Those are called archer fish. And if you notice, their mouths kind of point towards the surface of the water. This is because they can make a tube with their tongue and they can shoot water like a water gun. They'll hit insects and they'll fall into the water, and then they'll feed on the insects. You've got here, catfish is a big fish here in Texas. Everybody eats it, pretty much, so they get huge. As you can see, again, Texas fish tend to be black, silver, or brown. Right called barjacks. They're new to the aquarium, so they're all in here so that we can monitor how well they're eating, and we can also give them medication. So when we first get them, we don't know if they have any parasites and things like that. So we run them through a series of medications before we put them into a tank with our other animals to make sure that if they had any parasites, they don't